Everybody can hear me now? Okay. Good evening. Bonsoir. This evening I'll be giving you a presentation about my third great granduncle, Alexander Stewart. They're all named Alexander, you'll see as we go along. And the reason I went there is, I'll explain it throughout the presentation, it came from a story from my dad, and I started doing research. So, okay, next. Where did it come from? So it's, as a young boy, my father would tell me a story about a rich Stewart who lived in the United States, in New York, who owned a lot of land, had a lot of money, he was one of the richest men around, blah, 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 blah. And I just didn't believe it. I said, he's just trying to tell me a story like for a kid. So, there had been all kinds of things happening within that story. A rich person, he owned Broadway in part of Manhattan, was very rich. And that my grandfather, supposedly Alexander Stewart, received some sort of annuity from that, from the estate. And I was very skeptical, like, what is this? How come nobody knows? So, as I went on, this is a true story. This is not my grandfather, this is my third great granduncle. He was born in Donegal and sailed to Quebec City. Married Mary Carnahan and lived in Wolfe's Cove for a while. I suspect, I couldn't find any information about that, but I suspect he was in shipbuilding, he lived in Wolfe's Cove, probably with anything that had to do with wood. Then he moved to St Catherine-de-Fossambault, the Seigneurie, and he cleared the land, he pioneered there. After that, he left for Cavendish, Vermont, and worked in a mill and enlisted in the militia. You'll see as we go along. So, that's not very clear, but that's his marriage certificate. And Alexander Stewart from Fossambault, bachelor, married Mary Carnahan from Quebec. And they were married here at Quebec St. Andrew's Church. So the Stewarts, when they came to Quebec, were Anglican, Presbyterian, and it went on back and forth, and finally became Catholic. So it's step by step. Anyways, Alexander got married, and here we go. Now, Alexander and Mary Carnahan had a daughter, and they had several children, Isabella. But what's interesting here is that they're in St. Paul's Church of England. And as we go along, you'll see that's where she was baptized, on the Cove. So that's where Isabella was baptized. So it's interesting to see the cliffs and everything else. It's a very old photo. So we know that they lived there, that's for sure. And this is a postcard of the Wolfe's Cove. And we can go here to Champlain Street here. It's a very old postcard. That's where Wolfe landed, of course, everybody knows that. So as we go along, Alexander, here we got my third great-grandfather and my third great-granduncle right here. John Stewart, my great-great-grandfather, and Alexander Stewart is my great-great-great-uncle. That's the one I'm talking about tonight. So they had land in the Seigneurie de Fossambault, and in 59 they abolished the Seigneurie completely. The whole system was abolished in Quebec, and they had to do accounting. So basically, we know that John Stewart owed the seigneur £1 and 10 shillings, and he had two lots, 30 acres each. And Alexander and his son, this is Alexander the uncle, this is my great-great-grandfather, and this is Alexander, John's son, who has also some land there. So, and they owed money to the seigneur because they were closing the books. And basically everybody paid the seigneur the money they owed. But the seigneurial, what I would call tithes, or whatever you want to call them, were paid until 73, I think. I mean, it went on and on and on. It didn't end abruptly. So we've got, John's got 30 acres and another 30 acres here, and Alexander the same thing. And the son, John's son, has 30 acres. This is a map of Lake St. Joseph. Pine River is right there. And these are the lots where the Stewarts were. So if you're going down the road to Place Germain, those who know Lake St. Joseph, There's a bridge there. And that's probably here, probably what the old bridge was, a Taffy Bridge, T-A-E-F-F-E, Taffy. The family was there. And the bridge is now a modern bridge. And you have the Place Germain over here. So my ancestors were on the right-hand side of this, the road going, Fossambault, going to Place Germain. These are the lots I was talking about before. So we have the 51 census. John, my great-great-grandfather, and his brother Alex. How many acres? 180 acres. 20 under cultivation, under crops, 8 acres. Under pasture, 12. So they cut off a lot of wood. And the way that the land is, it's like goes from the mountain right down to the river. So basically for the people from Shannon, they would know where the Mars lived. And the Kileys up and the McLennans lived on the mountain. They would have been the neighbors going down right to the river, Pine River. So it's not very clear, but that's the best I could do. We've got John Stewart, my great-great-grandfather from Donegal. He's Anglican at that time, and he's 47 years old, and he's married to, his wife is Catherine McIlwain. Now, the census enumerator wrote Muckleman, which is kind of weird, but her name was McIlwain. And we've got Alex here, the one that's concerns us tonight. Alex and his wife, Mary Carnahan. And she was born in Tyrone, right over here, sorry. Alex here, and his wife, Carnahan. He's from Donegal, and she's from Tyrone. So they're what you call the Ulster Irish, or the Scot Irish. And as we go along, this is from Ancestry, my tree. I've got a lot of people on my tree. I got 14,000 people on my tree. Half of them are my mother's side, and the other half on my father's side. From my father's side, I've got all of Shannon mapped out. I mean, every family you can think of is probably there. And still looking for others, but a lot of them. So the people in Shannon are all connected by blood or marriage. It's just one big tree. It's not little trees that are, it's just, they married within, 1 mile from each other. So the neighbor married a neighbor's daughter or neighbor's, whatever. So they're all enmeshed like a big web. And that goes from Valcartier right to St. Raymond, St. Basile. They're all enmeshed. The McClintocks were St. Raymond, the Clearys from St. Basile, the Bowleses from Valcartier, the Lannons from Valcartier, and you name the families, and the Corcorans, whatever, McLennans. So we've got Alexander here and Mary Carnahan, and we've got Isabella from, we talked about her at the Mariners Church Chapel, married to George Jeffs, and Alexander and his son Matthew, and we've got a son Samuel. Samuel was born in Quebec City, and Matthew was born in St. Catharines. We'll get to them in a moment. So we've got different names here. We've got the Pipers, and we've got Riley, and a whole bunch of them. So Alexander decides that he's leaving the Seigneurie de Fossambault, and he's going to live in Vermont. So he goes there, and he becomes an operator, mechanic, whatever you want to call it, works in a mill. And so he sets up with his son and his daughters. You can tell Samuel is from Canada East, which is Quebec. And so he's in Cavendish, Windsor. So that was when I was doing research, it was interesting. So we're out in the States now. I've got some all over the place. But this was quite interesting. So I said, oh, the States. This is starting to look like the story my dad told me, the people in the States. These are the first ones I found in the States. So as we go along, Alexander joins the militia, the 17th Regiment of Vermont. He's 50 years old with his 2 sons. And the life expectancy of a man in those days was 39 years of age. He's 50 and he enlists to go fight. And these are the battles he fought. Yeah, he did all that. So that's pretty impressive. You didn't think that a guy from Donegal comes over to Shannon, Quebec, goes to St. Catherine, Shannon, and all of a sudden goes to Vermont, and all of a sudden he's enlisted in the army. And he's fighting all these battles. But as you can see, some of them are pretty impressive. Here at Petersburg, there's 8,000 casualties. Here, there's 32,000 casualties. So he must have seen some pretty awful stuff. It's pretty brutal. You know, we're talking close combat and all that stuff. And so he got all these things, and then he mustered out in 65. So I was quite impressed by that. I said, wow, that's pretty neat. A 50-year-old man, wow. So this is his pension record, or part of it anyway. So Mary Carnahan wanted to get a pension, and he wanted a pension. So she's a widow, and she gets a pension from the Vermont authorities. This is a record of his service. So he's in the 17th Vermont Infantry, private. Returned from war with deafness at both ears and chronic back problems. He was lucky, he didn't get shot. And so he got a pension, I'm pretty sure. He's buried in the Hillcrest Cemetery. We'll get to that later on. Okay, this is another record from the Army. So we've got Alexander Stewart here, his record. And of course, they're talking about, a little further down here is, I don't know if you can read it well, but they're talking about his deafness and stuff like that. So this is an official record of his Army time.
Was it only 1 year?
Well, if we go back here, he mustered in 64, and it came, yeah, about a year, yeah, approximately.
Oh, yes.
So that's what it looked like, you know, if you're in the Civil War, you're fighting, you're in the trenches, you're the cannons and everything else. So he must have been part of that. Of course he was. So we're back to his record here. And yes, his widow Mary. She asked for a pension later on in 1892. Oh, sorry. So this is Samuel, his son. And his picture of him in his uniform. And that's him with his house and his wife, his farm. Yeah. So it's pretty impressive seeing that. You know, when I found this picture, I said, "Wow, this is pretty awesome." You know, how many times you get to see that? So so he survived. He lived to 82. Yeah. So we're changing subjects now. We'll leave Alexander go for a while, and we're going to talk about Alexander Turney Stewart. Now, Alexander Turney Stewart came from Ireland, and he was raised by his grandfather, and we'll get to that. So keep in mind that this guy is quite the man. So who is he? In 1803, he was born in Lisburn, Ireland. His father died when he was 3 months old, raised by his grandfather. Arrived in New York with $500, worked in a grocery store, and in 48 he built a store on Broadway. He owned mills, factories in Ireland, all over the place. In 1869, more real estate in Manhattan than anyone else. He was pretty rich. Yeah. And he purchased the Grand Union Hotel and Resort in Saratoga Springs, making it the largest hotel in the world. Wow. So he had a lot of money. Now this story, as you can see, is starting to evolve. That's the store on Broadway, the one he had. 20,000 clients a day. Yeah. Huge. And he had one before that. He tore it down, he built that one. They call it the Iron Palace because of the way it was built with the iron gates and everything. Okay, so this is what he did. He had to work, just in the Iron Palace, the store, he had 9 department heads, 25 bookkeepers, as you can see, and 900 seamstresses. He was heavily involved with clothing for women. And he did not bargain. He would set lower prices, and that was a change. I don't know if you've ever saw the series Mr. Selfridge, you know, something like that. Yes. Well, that would resemble that. And during the Civil War, he manufactured clothing for the army, and he sent a shipload of provisions to Ireland during the famine. So he sent a boat out to his hometown in Ireland, full of food. He was a very generous person. And we have here Judge Henry Hilton. Alexander had no children. So basically, this Henry Hilton became his protege type of guy. And his story is going to get a little different as we go along. So basically, he was a very, very influential man in New York. and even offered the position of Secretary of Treasury, but the law did not allow it. That's his house. So he owned a mansion, and one of the best looking houses in New York. So, hey, lots of money coming in, lots of money coming in. In those days, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
No taxes. No taxes.
I don't know about that. Anyways, so he dies. And he's placed in the vault in the churchyard. And everything's covered up. And the resurrection men stole his cadaver and asked for a ransom. So they dug him out. They took him out of the vault, took off with him, and they asked for a ransom. Yeah. So he was a rich man, so they, hey, what the hell? We're going to get some money from the family. So that was where the vault was, right here. So you go down on the ground, and you put the caskets in there, and they dug him up and took him away. Yeah. There's a whole book written on that. Yeah. Oh. So, anyways, this is where it gets interesting. Alexander Stewart from Vermont, from St. Catherine, from Donegal, same guy. He says, I'm surprised to learn that by the papers that the late A.T. Stewart was a cousin of mine. We came over from Ireland about the same time, but knew nothing of each other till we sailed from Belfast, and he sailed from Belfast, and I landed in New York. He landed in New York. As I suppose, I sailed from Londonderry and landed at Quebec. His father was my own Uncle Thomas. So that's the story my dad told me. He said, oh, we've got a relative living in New York who's very, very rich. So this is starting to make a lot of sense. I've long been satisfied of this. I've written to him once, but received no reply, and was intending to have had an interview with him this summer, but I'm too late to see him personally. I have no relatives in this country by my name now. I would be glad to hear from Mrs. A.T. Stewart in regards to it. Please do me the kindness and gratefully oblige an anxious friend. Very respectfully yours, Alexander Stewart. Now, the story my dad told me was there was something going on at the will. Alexander had become ill, Alexander Turney, and some lawyer and someone else came and made him sign some papers and changed his will. Now, that's what I heard. So, basically, Judge Hilton, with the protege, he becomes, you'll see as we go along, so Alexander, the Vermont farmer, claims to be an heir to the estate. Excuse me. And he brings a claim there. So he said, hey, maybe I'm entitled to something here. I'm related to him. And Judge Hilton is not related to him. So it's been settled out of court satisfactorily. And what does that mean? I don't know. Was that the annuity that my father talked about? Because the annuity that we talked about at that time was Alexander Stewart, I thought it was my grandfather, which he wasn't, was getting an annuity from New York by a guy who had a big store and had died, and he got some money from that. That would make a lot of sense. So basically, if we look at that, satisfactorily settled out of court means, hey, the $200,000 he wanted, probably got it. Now, we've got Alexander Turney Stewart here, Alexander Turney Stewart there with a beard, and here we have my grandfather, Alexander, my grandfather, and this is my great-great-great-grandfather, Alexander. So, they're all Alexanders. If you look at the traits, they look somewhat alike. So, yeah, and don't forget, Alexander here knew his father, and knew all the stories too. He was part of that. So he was living in the old Stewart house in Shannon. So he lived to be 92, and my grandfather 85. So as we go along, so Alexander Stewart, the soldier, died at his home at age 88. And he was enlisted, he lived in Cavendish for 35 years, and his wife, Samuel, his son, Matthew, and also a soldier of the Civil War. Sorry.
What does it mean when he cannot long survive?
Because she's invalid, that's why.
Oh, okay. Is there an issue with the father?
There's a lot of strange stuff in obituaries back then, a lot of it. A lot. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. So this is where Alexander was buried in Vermont. You've got a monument here with a flag because he was a Civil War veteran. And his Mary Carnahan is buried there too. And Samuel and Matthew are also in Vermont. So they're all, the whole family was in Vermont. So as we go along now, we know that this whole story with Alexander Turney Stewart being a very rich man and being very, very generous and having his body stolen from the crypt and all this stuff, it's in a book. I'll show you the title of the book later on. And it's like a Sherlock Holmes story, the way they went about that. It's quite the story. So anyway, he passed away. So the Stewart, I'm going to talk about the Stewart lineage. Basically, we're from Brittany, France, and then the Isle of Bute, Scotland, and then to Donegal. And that's the mystery part. That's the part that we're working on with a group, the Stewart group. There's a genealogist from Boston. She studied in Scotland. And we're all working with about 35 or 50 of us, trying to figure out where we were in Donegal. We know we were in Donegal, but where, what parish? We're looking for documentation stuff. So we know they were in Ireland, and we don't know for how long, but long enough to settle and become Irish. And coming back to Quebec and then going into Seigneurie de Fossambault and basically going to Vermont and other places for all the Stewarts that were around. Okay, now the Declaration of Arbroath is written by Scottish barons, addressed to Pope John XXII. King Robert wasn't happy of being excommunicated for disobeying the Pope's demand in 1317 for a truce of the First War of Scottish Independence. So what they did is the DNA of the people that signed that was studied. And my DNA was studied. And I did a DNA test, one of them being very specific. So, the University of Strathclyde, Glasgow, descendants and signatories of the Declaration. So the first phase of this strand involved the gathering of Y DNA, which is the male chromosome only. So you can trace from your father or grandfather and upwards, right up to the top. The Y chromosome, research and listed the participation of documented male line descendants of 3 sons of King Robert II. This particular strand of DNA indicated descent from one of his illegitimate sons, Sir John Stewart, Sheriff of Bute, Argyll, Scotland. Now, John Stewart was illegitimate, and he was called John Stewart the Black. And probably because he wore black suits or something, I don't know. But, so basically the branch where I come from is that one there. Yeah. Well, he was named sheriff because he couldn't be a prince. He was illegitimate. So he was his half-sister married Robert the Bruce. So my DNA marker is only seen in direct descendants of the Stewart dynasty. Kings and queens who ruled Scotland. So this is the fact. And as you see, Walter Fitzalan, the first High Steward of Scotland, adopted his role as his surname. Being a steward, being a caretaker, that's where the name came from. You'll see it S-T-U-A-R-T. The French said it Stewart, and the English went Stewart. And came from Scotland, established himself at central Scotland, and Henry I, after 1100, made lords of Ovestry and Shropshire. The English king knew of the family because they were hereditary stewards of the bishops of Dole, a town near the coast of Brittany, not far from Mont Saint-Michel. So they crossed over and went to Scotland, and went from Scotland to Ireland to Quebec, and so on and so forth. Whoop. So this is a result of one of my tests. As you can see, right over here, I got a shared ancestor from the House of Stewart, which I just explained, Walter Fitzalan. And it says rare connection, only 271 customers are closely related to House of Stewart. And so that we share the common ancestor.
And the tapestry.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, the Bayeux Tapestry, yeah. So this is the tree. As over here you've got John Stewart, my John Stewart. And if you go up, and you go to Alan Fitzlad, St. Malo, Brittany. Then you go down, and you get to James Stewart and Robert II, Robert III, James, and then you get all the Stewarts right to Mary Stewart and all that. So that's where I come from, this branch right here, going right up. I don't know, you can't see very well, that's the Stewart of Butte tartan. It's more of a darker reddish. I can use that one, or I can use the Royal Stewart, because it's part of my heritage. So it's difficult to see. Sorry about that. So more information. Sir John Stewart of Montcuil was a knight, and he fought in the battle. He died there at Falkirk in 1298. Again, it's a rare connection. Same thing. So that's me, and that's John Stewart, the knight, and we have we shared DNA. That's the Stewart that the castle of Stewart's had. Sorry, and basically that was built by FitzAlan or his son. They're not sure yet. It's still there. You can still visit it. I haven't visited yet, but I will. And Prince William, son of King Charles, is the Duke of Rothesay, because it's a title given to him. There's no bloodline. It's just a title that's given to the prince. It used to be Charles, now it's William. Automatically they get the title. But they have no bloodline for that castle. So it's Fitzwalter and Isle of Bute to the lordship. First it was a wooden castle, then the Norwegian back fleet attacked. So the Vikings came and they attacked. And you'll see where I'm getting at with that. Osprak's forces fought, and that was an assault on the castle. Rothesay was taken again by the Norwegian forces. The campaign was a failure. The Norse retreated and ended their authority in Scotland. And Rothesay was held by the English, but was taken by hero Robert the Bruce. Following the accession of the Stuarts to the throne of Scotland in 1371, the castle became a favorite residence of Kings Robert II and Robert III. So we have the Vikings. The Vikings, they're, well, unfortunately I have Viking blood, so I've got, this is part of my test, the DNA test, specialized ones. My index is 32. That means I've got 32% of Viking blood compared to the other people who have the DNA. If they're not from Norway or from northern Scotland or whatever, if they have more DNA, I have 32% compared to that ensemble. That's the way DNA works. It works by groups. The more people they have, the more precise it gets. So I do have Viking DNA. And they used the samples. They excavated bones, and they processed the DNA, and to prove that I do have a link with the Vikings. So I'm not surprised if the Viking attacked the Rothesay Castle, the Stuarts, well, there must have been maybe some Norwegian minglings going on. Who knows? So this is the book that was written about Alexander Torney Stewart, the rich man, and what happened about when they stole his cadaver and they asked for ransom. And it's a pretty, a couple hundred pages, I think. And it's pretty interesting. If you want to read that, it's quite a read. It's a bit of like a Sherlock Holmes thing. And it goes through all the process and how his widow reacted and how Judge Hilton got involved. And by the way, Judge Hilton, he inherited everything from Alexander Turney, and he lost everything. He did some very, very bad things, bad administration, bad investments, things that Alexander set up. They all fell apart, and finally, nothing came out of it. So it wasn't a very popular story. However, Alexander Turney Stewart is the only one. I can go back to Alexander for a moment. Okay. His accomplishments as far as going from a grocery boy to being one of the richest men in New York, in America, I think he was the fifth richest with the Vanderbilts and Rothschilds and those. Compared to the other families, which was old money, he did it all himself. He was worth probably $90 billion in today's money. Like a Bezos or those guys, you know. So that was a lot of money back then. But it's still being taught in universities, what he did, because he went from a self-made man. He wasn't given the money through inheritance or estates or trusts or anything like that. He did it all by himself. So, sorry about that. Yeah. So if you're interested in learning about his odyssey as a cadaver, Alexander Turney had built churches. He had built whole sections of Broadway in Manhattan. He built railways. He had factories. He had boats. He had ships. He had all kinds of stuff. He was a very, very, very astute businessman. So my great-great-great-granduncle Alexander Stewart from Fossambault in Vermont went up against Judge Hilton for the estate, and from what I gather, he won. And that makes this family story come true, which is quite unbelievable because I never really took it seriously until I started researching in my family tree and doing DNA tests and stuff like that, and things got...
Did they pay the ransom?
Sorry?
Did they pay the ransom? Read the book. Read the book.
I don't want to... No, spoiler alert, but there was a ransom paid several times, actually, to different people. No, there was no DNA back there, so was that Alexander? We don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. There's a mystery involved in there. So that's basically it. It's a short presentation, but gives you an idea of what happened back in those days. From being a small, coming from a small area in Donegal, coming here and being a pioneer in St. Catherine, cutting the trees and clearing the land, living in log houses, because they did live in log houses. It's a story that goes from, fighting in a civil war and then fighting against a multi-million-dollar estate, and just being a farmer, and saying, I'm going to go and fight, and putting up a big fight, because he fought, but there was 100 other people that gave their names to go fight. Oh, I'm related. They all raise their hands. Like when you win the lottery, they come out of the woodwork. So they all raise their hands, but he's the only one I found that got a settlement. So I guess everything fell into place. So that's the story. I thank you very much. It's the story of the Stewarts, and I wanted to add the last part about the family name, where it came from, and